I didn't even want to go. The email landed in my inbox at exactly 8:55 a.m. The subject line? Dinner with the Carters, Friday, 6 p.m. A formal invite from HR, complete with a little smiley face at the end, as if that made it feel friendly. After 25 years of helping grow Core Logic Dynamics from a scrappy startup in a rented warehouse to a $288 million global analytics company, this dinner was how I was summoned. Not a meeting, not an investor call, just dinner. With the CEO and his family. My name is Abigail, and I was the very first person ever hired at Core Logic. I didn't just work there. I was the company. Back when we had only 2 clients and one old printer that jammed if you looked at it the wrong way, I was the one keeping everything afloat. I built our client systems, managed vendor contracts, kept the books until we could afford a CFO, and closed deals that kept the lights on. Ronald Carter, the founder, used to call me his quiet engine. He said I kept things running when everything else was about to fall apart. But lately, things have changed. Ronald had grown distant. My updates went unread. Our Monday check-ins became weekly calls, which then became, let's reschedule indefinitely. And then came the interns, loud, full of buzzwords, talking about synergy and disruption as they'd invented it. So, when the dinner invitation came, I knew something was coming. I just didn't know how cold the wind was about to get. The restaurant was one of those trendy rooftop places downtown. Overpriced scallops, dim lighting trying too hard. I wore a soft navy blouse and the pearl earrings my daughter gave me last Mother's Day. I looked exactly how I always had, polished, professional, prepared. Ronald was already there, standing by a long white table with his wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Frances. Frances looked like she'd stepped out of a high-end ad, perfect blonde hair, a spotless linen suit, and a LinkedIn-worthy presence that practically shouted future CEO. Abigail, Ronald said with a big smile, arms open. So glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, sitting down across from him as my stomach twisted into knots. At first, it was like any other company dinner. Too much wine, too many empty compliments. Frances asked about the early days of the company, her tone sweet but mocking. It's so funny imagining you guys working out of, like, a garage or something, she giggled. I smiled politely. It wasn't very funny at the time. Ronald stepped in, trying to add some weight. Actually, Abigail saved the company twice. She brought in our first defense contract, which led to our first $1 million. Frances just smirked. Well, every company needs its building blocks. I should have left then, but I stayed. I wanted to see how far they'd go. Halfway through the halibut, Ronald folded his hands and looked at me like he was about to make a peace offering. Abigail, we've been doing some long-term planning, he began. You've been more than instrumental in getting Core Logic where it is today. Here it comes. But as we prepare for the company's next phase, we believe it's time to bring in new energy. A fresh vision. I kept my face calm. Frances just finished her executive leadership program at Stanford, he added proudly. She's full of great ideas. Blockchain, AI, modernizing the brand. Impressive, I said. What's the transition plan? Ronald looked relieved. 7 weeks. She'll shadow you. We'll make the formal announcement after the next quarterly call. And of course, we've prepared a generous exit package. We want you to feel appreciated. That's when Frances leaned in, fork in hand, eyes sharp with something close to glee. Time to step aside, Granny, she said with a smirk. Let us take it from here. The table fell silent. Even Sarah's fork froze midair. I looked at Frances for a long moment. Then I smiled. I completely understand, I said. What they didn't know, what they never even thought to check, was that Core Logic wasn't just a company I helped build. In a quiet but powerful way, I owned part of it. They had forgotten, but I hadn't. Back in 1990, when Core Logic was still struggling to stay alive, Ronald gave me 8% equity in the company. We couldn't afford raises, and I had just pulled an all-nighter fixing a massive billing mistake that nearly cost us our biggest client. Ronald had walked into my office, red-eyed and anxious, and handed me a single sheet of paper. Abigail, he said, I can't pay you what you deserve right now. But if we survive this, I want you to have a share of it." At the time, I barely read it. It felt more like a thank you card than a real agreement. I was exhausted, loyal, and foolishly hopeful. But years later, when we finally brought in outside investors, I had a lawyer go through every contract I had ever signed. That's when I realized the truth. It wasn't symbolic. It was real. I had equity. I had voting rights. I had ownership. I never brought it up. Never bragged. Never reminded Ronald. I didn't need to. I thought I was still part of the company's soul. But core logic changed, and so did Ronald. He stopped asking for my opinion and started chasing trends. Buzzwords became more important than results. Consultants cycled in and out, but the ones who praised Francis's polished LinkedIn profile, they stayed. Suddenly, loyalty didn't matter. Quiet results didn't matter. Only appearances did. And I didn't look like the future anymore. The following Monday, I walked into work like nothing had happened, smiled at the front desk, poured my usual black coffee from the machine that still hissed like a steam train, logged into my email. Nothing had changed, at least not yet. No official announcements, just silence. Austin, our data engineer, stopped by my office. He gave me that cautious look he gets when something feels off. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Just dinner with the Carters." He winced. "People are talking. They're confused." I met his eyes. Let them wonder. I wasn't ready to reveal everything. Not yet. Instead, I opened the shareholder portal and logged in. My 8% stake was still right there, untouched. And thanks to the new investors and the company's growth, that small piece had become very valuable. I downloaded everything: stock agreements, board voting records, executive pay reports. Then I reached out to Ronald's assistant. I'd like 25 minutes with Ronald. Just the two of us. She blinked but nodded. "I'll see what I can do." By Wednesday, I was sitting in Ronald's office. He looked up from his desk with a tired smile. "Abigail," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "How are things?" "Curious," I replied as I Saturday, "you didn't mention the equity I still hold." His smile faltered. "I assumed you'd cashed that out by now." "I didn't," I said, placing the printed shareholder agreement on his desk. "And unless I'm missing something, I still have voting rights." Ronald folded his hands. "Abigail, this doesn't have to be difficult. We're offering you a very generous exit." "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "Not yet. I'll support the transition. I'll do it respectfully. But if Francis plans to restructure, bring in her people, or sell off assets, I want a seat at that table." He frowned. "You're holding on out of nostalgia." "No," I said. "I'm holding on to what I built." Then I stood up and left before he could answer. Let him sit with that. That night, I pulled out an old filing cabinet from my home office. Inside were pieces of the past, sketches of our first system, scribbled notes from client meetings, and the original UI mock-ups drawn on napkins. Then I found something I hadn't seen in years, an NDA Ronald had signed back in 1990. It confirmed that several of the tools I had developed for core logic were originally based on systems I created during my earlier consulting work. It was the kind of fine print most people forget. But I didn't forget. Not now. Not ever. But I don't forget. The next day, I met Julie, an old friend and now one of the best intellectual property lawyers in the city. We sat at a quiet little bistro, just 3 blocks from Core Logic's headquarters. I handed her a thick folder filled with old contracts, designs, and documents. "Can I protect this?" I asked. Julie flipped through the papers, her expression sharp and calm. Then she smiled. "Abigail, you own this. At least part of it. And with your equity stake, you've got more leverage than they ever expected." I exhaled, feeling the weight of 17 years settles in my chest. "They think I'm just a stepping stone. Then let's remind them," she said, "that even stepping stones can crack a foundation." By the end of the week, the whispers had started. Why is Abigail still here? Why is she so calm? Why hasn't Francis taken over yet? I just smiled as I walked past them in the hall. They thought that dinner was my ending. What they didn't realize was that I was writing the next chapter. By Monday, Francis was unofficially camped in my office. She'd show up early, carrying coffee with a forced smile, pretending we were partners. But her tone was sweet in that rehearsed way, and her questions came with an edge. She asked about vendors, back-end systems, and budgets, but I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't here to learn. She was here to replace them. "Do you always approve budget requests manually?" she asked one morning, flipping through a report she didn't understand. "Always," I said. "It catches errors. Automation doesn't. But if we use predictive tools are only as good as the data behind them. Some of our legacy clients are still running on systems from 11 years ago. Garbage in, garbage out." She blinked, clearly unfamiliar with the phrase. Then smiled. "You're a bit old school, huh?" There it was. I smiled back. Old school kept this company alive through 3 downturns. But by all means, learn the hard way.
She didn't like that.
By Wednesday, she scheduled her first strategy session, and I wasn't invited. The entire leadership team got the email. Except me. Austin forwarded it to me anyway. "Figured you'd want to see this," he wrote. Subject line: Vision 5.1, Core Logic's future begins now. Cute, I opened the agenda and saw it immediately. New branding, aggressive hiring, and, seriously, outsourcing back-end services. I laughed out loud. Half of Core Logic's client loyalty was because of our back-end. We weren't just selling pretty dashboards, we were the ones keeping their systems online when everyone else gave up. Frances didn't understand that. She didn't understand us. She only knew the story her father told at Sunday brunch. Later that afternoon, Ronald stopped by my desk. Something he hadn't done in years. "Abigail," he said, putting on his politician smile, "I want the transition to go smoothly. Frances is getting a lot of visibility already." "Visibility isn't knowledge," I said flatly. He paused. "You've always been the soul of this place. And you invited me to dinner to rip the soul out of it." He flinched just slightly. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it, Ronald?" "Because I'm the one who built the systems. I'm the one who kept investors from walking when things got rough. I held this place together while you were off taking sabbaticals in Napa." Silence. "I know about the Series C dilution," I added. "You're prepping the company for acquisition." His eyes widened.
"How?"
"I've been here long enough to know when the winds are changing." He didn't deny it, just stared at the floor. "We had to make hard choices," he mumbled. "The board wants a fresh face. A new story. A story that doesn't include me." He hesitated. "We're offering you a package." "I'm not interested in your package," I said, rising. "I'm interested in what I'm owed." Then I walked away before he could say another word. Back in my office, I sent Julie an email. I wanted provisional patents filed by the end of the week, not just for the old systems, but for every improvement I had made over the years. I wasn't trying to sabotage the company. I was just drawing a line. Anything with my fingerprints was going to be legally protected. Thursday morning, I found Frances standing at the whiteboard, mapping out her new client retention model. I looked closer and nearly laughed. She'd lifted it almost word for word from a strategy doc I wrote 5 years ago. She must have gone digging through the archives. Good, let her keep digging. Because while she was searching for shortcuts, I was already building my next move. When she noticed me watching, she smiled and said, "I'm just modernizing your work." It gave me a solid foundation. "No problem," I replied, stepping closer. "Just make sure you give credit where it's due. Plagiarism doesn't look great on quarterly reports." Her smile wavered slightly. By Friday, whispers had started in the IT department. Kathy, my operations lead, caught me in the break room with a concerned look. "They're nervous," she whispered. "Frances is pushing through changes that don't add up and Ronald isn't saying anything." "That's because Ronald's not really in charge anymore," I said. "He just doesn't realize it yet." Kathy stared at me. "What are you doing, Abigail?" I smiled. "Setting the table." "For what?" "For the storm," I replied. "But don't worry, I'll smile right through it." That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of red wine, my laptop open in front of me. The emails were already drafted. One was to the remaining 5 board members, reminding them of my equity, and the clause in our original agreement requiring unanimous consent for major structural changes. Another was to Nexera Systems, a company we'd nearly acquired last year. They were growing fast, and I still had a good relationship with their CEO. I wanted a meeting. The third was to me the subject line, leverage. I was saving everything just in case. I didn't want a war. I wanted recognition. But if they pushed me, they'd find out how old school I could be. The official announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Mandatory all-staff meeting. Frances stood at the front of the auditorium, wireless mic in hand, pacing like a TED Talk speaker. Behind her, a slideshow of stock photos and corporate buzzwords flashed. Vision. Velocity.
Victory.
Ronald introduced her with a wide smile, calling her a breath of fresh air. Frances beamed like she'd won a pageant. Then she said it. It's time for a new chapter, she began. A younger, leaner, more innovative CoreLogic. There it was. Not even subtle. I sat in the second row, arms crossed, watching the room. Most people looked uncomfortable. Kathy seemed stunned. Austin wouldn't even meet my eyes. Then Frances pointed to the screen. A new slide appeared. Organizational Streamlining Plan, Phase 1. My jaw tightened. The slide laid out the future. Back-end cuts, outsourced IT, department mergers, and the worst part, legacy management transition. That was their coded way of saying me. They didn't even bother to say my name. After the meeting, Frances found me in the hallway, alone, confident. I hope you'll be graceful about this, she said softly. It's what people expect of seasoned professionals. I tilted my head. You mean women who've outlasted 4 CEOs and built the systems that keep this company standing? She didn't respond, just smiled like I was being unreasonable. That afternoon, HR sent over the separation package. A large check, an NDA, a clause demanding I help with the full knowledge transfer. That's when they went too far. I walked into Ronald's office, package in hand. He looked like he was already bracing for the fallout. Abigail, he started. You let your daughter stand on that stage and pretend this was all her idea, I said. You let her call me obsolete in front of the entire company. And now you want me to hand over everything like some loyal, outdated employee? It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I snapped. Let me be clear. I'm not signing anything. Not today. Not ever. He sighed. Then you're leaving us no choice. You're forgetting something, I said, pulling a document from my bag. I still have a seat on the board. Try to force me out without board approval, and you'll be violating the original agreement. Ronald went pale. You think Frances's ideas sound fresh and exciting, I continued. But they're dangerous. Cutting the back end will cripple your infrastructure. And that fancy automation model she keeps talking about? It violates our client contracts, and you know it. He leaned back, speechless. I'm not trying to sink this ship, I added, but I won't let it drag me down with it. That night, I met with Kathy and Austin at a quiet diner across town. I handed them each a manila envelope. What's this?
Kathy asked. Proof, I said.
What we built isn't just code. It's intellectual property, documented, time-stamped, traceable. Austin looked at me. You're going to sue them? Not unless they make me, I replied. I just want you both to be protected, I told them. Frances is already planning a second round of cuts. Kathy nodded slowly. The PR team is already working on the press release. They're cleaning the house before the acquisition, I said. CoreLogic is being polished up, streamlined, and packaged like a product on display. Austin looked up. Are you going to stop it? No, I said. I'm going to shape it. For the next 5 days, I worked quietly like a ghost. I kept a low profile, but moved with purpose. I met with Julie again and filed a cease and desist letter to stop the unauthorized reuse of proprietary code in Frances's new systems. I also sent a formal letter to the board, stating that I'd vote against the restructuring unless a neutral third-party audit was conducted. Then I met with the CEO of Nexera over lunch, just a friendly conversation. But when I casually brought up CoreLogic's changing leadership, he raised an eyebrow. They're preparing for a sale, I said. He nodded. That explains why we've had several of their people reaching out. I smiled. If you're interested, I can tell you exactly which systems are worth protecting and who actually knows how they work. By Friday, the pressure was getting to Frances. Her voice sounded sharper in meetings, her smiles more forced. The confidence she had relied on was beginning to slip. People she thought she had swayed were starting to look back at me, and I just kept smiling, because while she was stirring up a storm, I had already built the flood walls. By Monday, 4 of Frances's big ideas had fallen apart. The vendor migration she promised would cut costs, delayed thanks to integration issues. In reality, Austin had quietly disabled a patch he'd written years ago that was key to making it work. The rebranding plan? On hold. Legal had flagged it for infringing on another tech firm's trademark. I knew the owner personally. I may have tipped them off. The new predictive analytics model? It failed during live testing. Crashed completely. Just as I'd warned. Garbage in, garbage out. Still, Frances didn't stop. She doubled down. That afternoon, she called a mandatory meeting for all department heads. Her voice was tight, and she forced a smile as she spoke. We're experiencing growing pains, she said, but we are on the right path. Disruption is never comfortable. From the back of the room, I raised an eyebrow. Disruption only works if there's a parachute. You've cut every safety net this company had. She gave a tight smile. Thank you for your feedback, Abigail. Ronald said nothing. He didn't even try anymore, just sat slumped in his chair while his daughter drove the company straight toward disaster. After the meeting, Kathy found me. 5 of our longtime clients called today, she said quietly. They're worried. One's threatening to walk if their service drops again. Let me guess, I said. Frances hasn't replied to their emails. She shook her head. She thinks they'll wait. They won't. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote an email to Brian Hughes, the CEO of Nexera. Subject: follow-up from our lunch body. If your board is serious, now is the time to move. Brian and his board had been circling CoreLogic for months, waiting for the right moment. I wasn't going to sabotage anything. I was simply holding up a mirror, letting them see what was happening behind the scenes. The next morning, I found Frances in my old office, feet on the desk, lazily tossing a stress ball. She didn't even look up when I knocked. Can I help you? She asked like I was some intern. I need a few minutes. She sighed. Make it quick. I stepped in, calm and steady. You're losing the company. That got her attention. I know you think people will follow you because you talk about innovation and branding, I said. But this company wasn't built on slogans. It was built on trust, on systems that actually work. She stood, eyes narrowing. Are you threatening me? No, I said. I'm giving you a chance. A chance to do what? To stop pretending you know what you're doing. She scoffed. My father is being pushed aside by his board. And that makes you a figurehead, just like him, I said. You want to lead?
Fine. Lead.
But don't burn down the foundation just to prove you can light a match.
She didn't respond.
I didn't expect her to. Later that day, Ronald asked to meet privately. No assistance, no Frances. He looked tired. Tired. Abigail, he said, sitting down across from me. What do you want? I took a breath. I want recognition. Not a check. Not a title. Just the credit I've earned. Ronald rubbed his face. The board is spooked, he said. They see the cracks and your name is still tied to every major system. They should be spooked, I replied. They gave control of a multi-million-dollar company to someone who thought experience was a weakness.
He paused.
What about Nexera? I had lunch with Brian. The offer's real, but I haven't said yes. Ronald looked at me seriously. You could walk away. I could, I said. But I won't. What I built still matters. They'll do it on my terms if they want to keep using it. That night, Kathy texted, Client X just sent a formal concern to the board. I answered, hold steady. Frances had the mic, but I had the power. And I was just a few steps away from changing everything. The boardroom was packed. You could feel the tension. It was an emergency meeting. Everyone was there, executives, leadership, and me. Frances sat flipping through a notebook she hadn't written in. Across from me was Brian from Nexera, calm and unreadable. Hannah, the board chair, spoke first. Abigail has raised serious technical, legal, and operational concerns. Things we didn't catch before. Heads turned. She continued, any leadership change that affects major shareholders needs full board approval. Abigail, would you like to speak? I stood calmly. I'm not here to cause trouble. I gave over 17 years to this company. But somehow, that loyalty became invisible. I'm not asking for a title. I want respect. I want leadership that understands this company's strength is its foundation. Silence, then Brian spoke. We've seen the fallout. Clients are uneasy. Contracts are on hold. And core logic systems aren't as solid as claimed. He looked at Francis. Our offer still stands, but only with stable leadership. It was clear Francis had to go. Hannah called a 15-minute break. I stayed in a room. So did Francis. I didn't mean to mess things up, she said softly. I know. You wanted to prove yourself. But you didn't ask what needed fixing. You treated people like barriers, and you treated me like I didn't matter. What now? She asked. That's up to the board. When we returned, Hannah made it official. Effective immediately, Francis is removed from leadership duties. Ronald will stay on as an advisor through the transition. Then she turned to me. Abigail Carter. We were asked to lead a transitional advisory team, reporting directly to the board and Nexra's senior partners. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Later that week, I signed my consulting contract. It paid 4 times my old salary. I was given full control over systems integration during the acquisition. No restrictions. Full trust. Francis left without a word, no goodbye message, no farewell meeting, just gone. Ronald found me in the lobby before he left. He shook my hand and said, quietly, I'm sorry. I know, I said. 3 months later, Core Logic officially became part of Nexra. Most of the staff stayed on. I chose the new leadership team myself. Kathy stepped in as director of operations. Austin took over engineering. Half the company now reported to people I had personally mentored. I didn't return to my old office. Instead, I worked from a small desk at home, overlooking the lake. Twice a week, I'd step out onto the deck with my coffee, barefoot, watching the sun rise while client dashboards loaded on my screen, systems I built still running silently in the background. One evening, an email from Hannah came through. The subject line read, Legacy. Abigail, what you did, how you did it, we've never seen anything like it. You didn't just protect your legacy. You reminded everyone what true leadership looks like. I sat there for a while, just staring at the screen. This was never about revenge. It wasn't about having power. It was about knowing your worth, standing by it, and never let anyone take it from you.